Running commentary. We are exploring listening to albums. It is a lost art form. We took an hour out of our day. We switched off the phones. We switched off the computers. We did not answer the door. We sat down and we listened to the artist's vision and concept. The Police, Zenyatta Mondatta. This is one of those suggestions by our producer and director, and again, this one didn't faze me too much. Police are a really big band in the UK and the US, so I knew going in that I had some sort of a relationship going in to the album with the Police. It's the third studio album by the group. It was recorded in Wisseloord Studios in Hilversum, Holland. Let's be clear though, that's not where the band wanted to record it. They'd made the first two at Surrey Sound. Now they were big stars, taxes dictated denial of the recording hat-trick. Nigel Gray, as co-producer, was, however, still in tow, and his fee brought the making of this album to £35,000, which was more than the expense of the two predecessors put together, yet still very cheap to what it would have cost a band of the Police's success by comparison. The record was made between the 7th of July and the 7th of August in 1980. It was written on the band's second tour. The band themselves have never been the biggest fan of this album. Zenyatta Mondatta as a title is probably best broken down in the following fashion. Zen, we know, it's that thing, that calm Zen. Jomo Kenyatta, who was the first president of Kenya. Monde is the French word for world, and Atta was probably a shout out to the wildly successful Regatta de Blanc. And if you think of like modern culture, it's like for shizzle my nizzle. I mean, it's like Zenyatta Mondatta. It has that same kind of rhythmic thing, which Stewart Copeland was a fan of those kind of album titles. The album performed very nicely, thank you, reaching number 1 in the UK, number 5 in the US, and what was then West Germany. The Police were Sting, Gordon Sumner, Stewart Copeland, who had been Curved Air's tour manager, and Andy Summer, who had played with Eric Burdon's Animals. It took a while for this band to be the final three. They had limped along with Corsican Henry Padovani until Andy had given them an ultimatum in the summer of 1977. I read Sting's book, and so it's fresh in my mind that he was a member of Last Exit, and also that he had switched to bass guitar. His move to London had been one of ambition, and it was a passion that his seasoned Last Exit cohorts didn't share. Miles Copeland was Stewart's brother, and he was far too busy to bother with the Police in the early days. Too busy with his high-priority punk bands to condescend with the Police. They caught his eye in the end, though, and he ended up managing them, and from what I can gather was instrumental in the band signing to A&M Records as a result of his love for Red Light Roxanne. Don't Stand So Close to Me is the biggest selling record, a single in 1980 from the Police. As a teen idol, I think this song worked in Sting's favour. It was a female-driven hit. Now, I'm a big Walking on the Moon guy. This song, to me, in comparison, is pedestrian. It lacks believability. But let's be clear, this version is far superior to the poncy rework of 1986. On a positive note, this song will always remind me of my cousin Wendy and family parties. Sting was most certainly a school teacher in Tyneside, and you wonder if that's where this song stems from. Let's find out about the old man from Nabokov. Maybe that literary reference is a key to a magic portal in appreciating this song. It is, of course, the book Lolita, which deals with older man, significantly younger female territory. The song is sung in third person, no magic portal, As usual, the whole world disagrees with me, and this song won a Grammy for Best Rock Performance by a duo or group with vocal. The song was #1 in UK and Ireland, #2 in New Zealand and Canada, #3 in Australia, Netherlands and Italy, and #10 here in the States. A lot of Police singles fire me up. This one extinguishes me. Driven to Tears. I like the rhythm and the guitar on this track. It has much more of the elements of the Police that I like. Too many cameras, not enough food is a lyric appropriate to today's culture. This is a respectable and signature representation of what I understand this band to be. When the world is running down, you make the best of what's still around is track 3. I agree with the sentiment of the title. Sting sounds like Steely Dan on this track. He name-checks Otis Redding. Andy Summers' guitar on this album is by far my favourite feature to this point. The song is adequate. The musicianship carries it. Not bad. Canary in a Coal Mine, track 4. This is a very pop track. Sting's trademarked lower and high parts rattle on at breakneck speed. I like the title. Canaries, of course, were used to determine whether a coal pit was noxious. If it was, the canary would die. I think Sting is one of those people who is quite proud of his Tyneside heritage, particularly as the pop machine painted him as far more sophisticated and southern. You pay your analysts to reach the same conclusions. Short, sweet. I don't know, this feels very out of step with Police offerings in general. It's a very British sound. I don't expect to hear another song of this ilk from them. I don't dislike it. I'm surprised it's on here is all. Voices Inside My Head. Now we're talking. It starts funky, it grooves, they're jamming, it chants. You can totally dance to this. Shout, shout. There's not much of a song, but it grabs you by the feet to the dance floor, and the Police score here with me big time. It's spirited and inspired, and I will certainly be buying this song for my collection. Bombs Away, a political reference to the Afghanistan strife that was happening in 1980. A very timely handling, sonically at least, of what becomes the cornerstone of the Police's writing style in later work. You can't help but feel Ghost in the Machine was the band stabbing back at the almost lightweight pop approach that pervades Zenyatta Mondatta. Bombs Away, but we're okay. Again, a very current soundbite for today's general indifference to distant suffering. Da-do-do-do, da-da-da-da. My second favourite Police song of all time, hands down. Andy Summers picks that guitar with fevered vitality on the verses and ends the song with hypnotic insistence. Let's sing Andy Summers' praises. Wasn't this the problem in the Police? Andy and Stewart weren't stupid people. The Copelands are a mind dynasty. Andy Summers has got 10 years of extra life experience. So does that mean I'm sitting here isolating Sting as the problem? Absolutely not. If you read his book, you can tell he's not a big head or an egotist. He's not full of himself. He's intelligent and enigmatic. I believe most of his problems stem from others' assumptions of him. What da-do-do-do-da-da-da says is that as babies, our innocence and method of communication is infinitely less problematic. We have to, of course, repeat the shocking lyric. And when their eloquence escapes me, their logic ties me up and rapes me. I feel sure that Trudy and Sting must have had a conversation about that lyric at some point. It's distinctly untantric. Behind My Camel, you won't find Sting anywhere on this track. He refused to play on it and is said to have buried a cassette copy he found laying around in disdain. To rub salt in the wound, it received a Grammy for Best Rock Instrumental Performance. A source close to the band had their own theory on what Behind My Camel was. Well, what do you get when you stand behind a camel? A pile of shit. This theory is unconfirmed. I'm glad Andy won a Grammy. The song for me does diddly squat. Man in a Suitcase, vocally similar to Canary. The theme is Super Trooper in that it whinges about touring. The lyrics are smart at times. This to me is a pretty disposable song. Shadows in the Rain, this is an atmospheric piece. The drum keeps time. It's got a kind of dub sensibility. There's squalling guitars here and there. I'm not into it. The Other Way of Stopping is an instrumental. I think this song works if you're watching the band live. I do believe that the band's tightly packed schedule resulted in a track listing here that was lacking the meat and potatoes that Police songs normally are comprised of. I think what's apparent on Zenyatta Mondatta is that the wheels are starting to fall off interpersonally. I mean, how do you refuse to play on a track? You're not a group anymore, are you? I mean, there's the dynamic between these three people who, just so you know, when they reformed in 2008 for the world tour, were, the most highly paid musicians ever at that point. To get them to come back together. These guys are, Stewart Copeland alone, if you just look at Stewart Copeland's work, the man is no idiot. He is incredibly intelligent, he has a lot of character, and he calls you on your shit. On a recent interview that I saw with him when he was constructing soundtrack musician, after he'd kept the French film crew waiting for about 10 minutes, he starts talking to you, and he assumes that you've got the same intelligence that he has, and, I don't think a lot of people have. He's an incredibly intelligent person. And apparently, they asked him how he learned to play drums, and he said, well, my dad, was a jazz guy. I'm not a jazz guy, but my dad was a jazz guy, so that's how I learned to play drums. He goes, oh, so you like jazz? No, I don't like jazz. Jazz musicians are not talented. Can you imagine Stewart Copeland saying to Sting that jazz musicians are not talented? Sting loves jazz. That's his thing. That's part of his whole solo thing. So that Stewart and Sting thing, these guys were going at it. There's a short little clip of them, Sting throws a glass of water in Stewart Copeland's face, and then they wind up tussling on the ground. It's good-natured, but I'm wondering, sometimes with those good-natured banter things, there's actually real hatred and disdain, lingering in the bottom of those puddles. Andy Summer, I guess, is 10 years older and just kind of wanting to be part of something successful, and he described in his film Sting as not being a team player and saying that he was out to get his own solo career. So why am I mentioning this? Because in Zenyatta Mondatta, whereas you've got this want for success in the first two albums, they want to be successful. Now they are successful, they're sort of not really gelling that well as people. They're in the middle of this successful juggernaut. Stewart Copeland and Sting are when they get on, they get on. You have to remember, by the way, that when Sting met Stewart Copeland, he was banging the crap out of these drums. This is a guy that really gives his all to the music. And Sting seems to be someone that is kind of more reserved. If you look at his general disposition, he doesn't say that much. He'll speak when he's spoken to, but he's not someone who's forthcoming and gabby in the same way that Stewart Copeland is. So I think what happens is that Stewart needles him until he explodes, and then the venom comes out. I just really think what you hear here is that this is a rush job. They had no time to record it. Don't get me wrong, there are some good songs here, but there's no Invisible Sun here. There's no Walking on the Moon. There's the shell of what the Police are, and sometimes Voices Inside My Head doesn't have great lyrics, but they're present, and everybody's there, but it's missing something, and I can't give it a great mark because it's not a great album, and they know it, and whether you know it or not, it isn't. So the final mark for running commentary, the Police, Zenyatta Mondatta, 65%.